Hi everyone, it's Yvette Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest, Dr. Steven Laureys, who is a neurologist, brain scientist, author and speaker. He's an award-winning neurologist, neuroscientist, recognized worldwide as leading clinician and researcher in the field of neurology, of consciousness. Dr. Steven Laureys is the author of the No Nonsense Meditation book, A Scientist's Guide to the Power of Meditation. I personally picked this book up off the shelf at Big W in Australia, and I thought it was a very timely book because we're hearing a lot about how meditation can help with our stress, our anxiety, to make us feel more present and really help during the global pandemic and when we're in lockdown and facing adversity and stress. So Dr. Steven Laureys, welcome to the Spirit Girl podcast show. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Yvette. I'm feeling great. And yourself?
Really, really well. And I'll welcome our global audience who are tuning in right around the world. I know they're all keen to find out more about the brain and really what's going on when it comes to meditation and mindfulness. How does it feel to have your book out now globally and for it to make its way all the way here to Australia?
Well, I'm very happy, of course. I'm from little country Belgium. My wife is Canadian, so at the moment I'm speaking from Quebec, Canada. And it's amazing to see how the book is now translated in 10 languages. So clearly there seems to be a need. And definitely with COVID, of course, we are confronted with the challenge of how we're dealing with this and taking care of our mental well-being. And so terribly excited. Thank you so much for the opportunity and speaking to our friends in Australia and Asia.
Well, I'm so happy your book is out because what I really loved about your book was just how you explained the brain, which we'll dive into, plus meditation, how we can do it. But before we dive into your book, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
I'm a medical doctor, a neurologist, actually working in the university hospital, seeing a lot of patients with severe brain damage. That's our area of expertise. People from all over Europe come to our center because we have these brain scans, technologies that permit us to reduce the uncertainty and better document the capacity for neuroplasticity after traumatic brain injury, but also bleeding and people who survive cardiac arrest but have impairments in terms of their thinking and perception. So here it's out of my comfort zone. Talking about meditation is something during my training as a neurologist or in medical school was never discussed. If anything, it was more negative connotation. And I, as I tell in the book, had to go through a personal crisis, which tends to be often the case, to kind of discover first yoga, then meditation. And that's what I wanted to share now, that this is something I think that can really help us. And it's also something now that I discuss in my consultation, and I prescribe not just medication, but also meditation. And I wanted to, as a scientist, also summarize what we know about the effects of meditation on your brain. And we could actually study that with the lab because we had these Buddhist monks. And my good friend Mathieu Ricard, he's from France. He's kind of a rock star of Buddhism, the translator of the Dalai Lama, kindly accepted to come as a guinea pig. And that permits me in the book to basically tell with, I think, easy language, all those clinical trials, scientific studies that now show that, yes, meditation is good for your brain.
When you got into becoming a neuroscientist, you wanted to go into neurology. Was that something from a young age as a kid you were fascinated with? How did the actual first step into neuroscience start?
A good question. I always wanted to become a medical doctor, so that was quite easy for me. And then during my training, I went for the area where we know the least about. I think when we talk about our mind, our ignorance is huge. That was exciting, and that's why I went into neurology training and also did my PhD. It was a time when we had these brain scans that permitted us to look inside the living brain. And so I'm terribly happy because the big questions I think we all ask as teenagers, where am I coming from in this universe, and how am I even thinking about these big questions? Well, basically now I'm paid. It's my job to think about the human mind and where our thoughts and perceptions and emotions come about. Very, very excited. And of course, working with these monks, they're experts of the mind, was for me very, very exciting. That's opening up a bunch of new projects. The choice was clear and maybe also related because I was born December 24th, not a lot of people in the hospital. And my mom lost a lot of blood, actually had a near-death experience. And she only told me that later when we started projects understanding near-death experiences. And so she said, well, you're here thanks to medicine, because she had a C-section. And so you will now serve medicine. So that's another area we can discuss near-death experiences. And maybe for the Australian listeners or anyone down under who had such an experience, please share it. We now have thousands of them in our database, but it's fascinating. And I think we need more research. Just send us an email, NDE from Near Death Experience, NDE at uliege.be, and you're part of the science of near death.
When you started meditation, in what form, and did you personally feel that it was a way to become more present, more aware, more awake?
Absolutely, Yvette. Studies show that a lot, 40-50% of the time, we're not really there. In our thinking, we are elsewhere, planning the future, thinking about the past. And some people seem to have more of that little voice buzzing and spinning. And for me, it became a problem 2012. I went through a crisis, was alone with the three young kids, thinking all the time, how did this happen? And of course, you can't change the past. And what is going to happen? How am I going to do this with my job? And then I couldn't sleep. I couldn't really be the dad I wanted to be, inspiring, was smoking, drinking, and then went to see my colleague's psychiatrist, took sleeping pills, antidepressants, and it was quite quickly clear that this was not how I wanted it to be. And I started doing yoga, and then I met Mathieu Ricard, that was at a TEDx in Paris, where he gave a talk on meditation. I gave a talk on consciousness and the brain. And so we started talking, and he figured out I wasn't feeling well. And he said, well, come with me on a retreat, which is what we did. And that was an eye opener for me. And so I said to him, well, now you come to my lab and I put you in our scanners and study how, in his case, 60,000 hours of meditation have an impact. And that was the start of it. So it was really learning other ways than through alcohol or tranquilizers to calm my own mind. And I'm terribly happy. And also, I think I should have learned this way earlier. Also, what I hear from patients when I now prescribe consultation, they say, doctor, it's a pity I waited till my burnout or tension headache or whatever problem to understand the benefits of this. So I think actually we should talk about this in schools, just the way we have, sport instructors, and it's part of mandatory hours in our educational, primary, secondary school. I find it very strange how we keep ignoring our mental well-being, emotional intelligence. And so that's why also I wrote the book, and I'm trying to change that. I was in Brussels a while ago discussing with politicians, European Parliament, trying to change things for the better.
I love that story, and I love the friendship you've developed with Matthew Ricard. When I grew up in Australia, I thought meditation was only for Buddhist monks, that you had to go up and be a Zen master and go up into the Himalayan mountains. That's all we ever saw on TV. It was very limited. And that's back in the 80s. And we also grew up in Australia with a culture of, if you get stressed, you have a drink, and drinking fixes everything. And in my experience, like you, Steven, I know that's not true for me, and as you've described, but what I did learn through burnout, don't wait to burn out to start meditation. With our brains, what happens when we're stressed?
When we're stressed because we need to give a presentation, prepare a podcast, those things, positive stress can help us. We're preparing for something, working on a project, and it permitted you to survive. When you're confronted to a dangerous animal, your heartbeat goes up, blood pressure goes up. And that still is the case now. There's less frequently dangerous animals in front of us, but we would have this when we're in traffic jam, when a colleague says something. And when that stress and the stress hormones, cortisol, noradrenaline, become chronic, it's no longer good. And then your brain suffers. So a little bit of stress is good for you to focus and do the job, but it's an inverted U curve, and too much, too long is definitely not good. And brain scans actually show that you can shrink your brain and important structures such as the hippocampus, critical for memory. And then you can do something about that. That is what we saw in these Buddhist monks, and what many studies have shown, that meditation can basically reverse and give you a bigger hippocampus. I can't introduce Mathieu Ricard, but he's a little bit with us because this is his brain, Yvette. This is a 3D print of the brain of Mathieu Ricard, and he's 70 plus, and we measured this, compared it to other people his age, and it's, well, bigger than average. So there's more brain cells. We have billions of brain cells, and more importantly, thousands of billions of brain connections. And so what we saw, what has been published and many studies have illustrated, is that meditation is a little bit like sport. It depends on which exercise you do. If you start running, you will get strong legs. If you start swimming, you will get strong shoulders. So if you would do focused attention meditation, you will see increased brain volume in networks important for attention, like here in the middle, in the front, which is, you see in the book, the anterior cingulate cortex. But then you can also do other meditation exercises, such as training compassion, loving kindness. And then you would see areas like here, left prefrontal areas, that will just be more developed structurally and change functionally. So yes, it's fascinating to see that it's the field of neuroplasticity. You have an impact and you can change these things, train your focus, attention, and your empathy. And with the machines, we measure this not only in monks, by the way. Our lives are very different from the life of Mathieu Ricard. He's not married, no kids, no job, stress like we have. But if you and I would start doing meditation for 8 weeks, we would see also measurable effects with these brain scans. I think the most studied protocol is called mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's wonderful. It's like you're touching all the different exercises. It's in a group with a trained healthcare professional. You see each other every week. And I think it's worth sharing that these effects are backed up by science. And their effect can be as big as that of the drugs that you can take against anxiety, against depression, against chronic pain. For me as a physician, that's really important. So I also prescribe the drugs, of course, when they're needed, but I would also talk about what's your lifestyle, what's the quality of your sleep, how much do you move, the quality of your relationships, and what do you eat, and what's possible to do with these stressors, and meditation is definitely one of them.
We've definitely needed science, incredible research you've been doing, and the discoveries in order to go, yes, we can actually see this is making a difference, because people are very time poor. But for someone right now who goes, I can't meditate, I've got so many thoughts, I can't sit still. But I too was like that once, where I couldn't even sit for 1 or 2 minutes in a lotus position, because now we're always on social media and it's instant and it's flicking. So our focus, attention isn't that big. That's why I like meditation, because it's a challenge practice, but it's how to focus. But what is meditation?
It's mental gymnastics. I think we can compare it to sport. I mean, if you say, I do sport, you should be a bit more precise. What exactly do you do? If you say I do meditation, well, there's different ways to do it depending on your needs. Sometimes we have a lot of expectations. We absolutely want those 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, sitting on our mat. To me, the challenge is to benefit from meditation mindfulness the rest of the day. I'm just back from a retreat. I was very fortunate, 5 days, no screens, internet, silence, wonderful people. That's a luxury, not easy to organize. I got 5 kids, my wife. But so, of course, then the retreat stops. You come back home, back to work. And what I try to do in the book is the philosophy: you do what you can. Okay, we're not Buddhist monks. Life is different phases and we have different needs. So it really depends. Why do you do this? Maybe because you can't fall asleep and you have that little voice in your head going over and over. Or maybe you have sometimes anxiety, maybe you can't focus, maybe you have difficulties at work, or you want more creativity, or you want to become a better human being and train empathy. And so depending on why you do this, there's different possibilities. There's wonderful apps. Headspace is worldwide, many others, and I give a summary in the book. And you start there for free, and then of course afterwards you need to pay, but I think it's worthwhile. Imagined Clarity is one where also Mathieu Ricard collaborated. And on the internet find a lot of things, because now with COVID we see how important it is. We meet really with other people and go find a coach or do these mindfulness-based stress reduction. So there's all these different ways to do it, alone, in group. And my favorite, of course, is basic exercise of just focusing on your attention. And you can do that sitting in lotus, but it's really not necessary. You can do it on a chair. You can do it sitting in your car, in the supermarket. If you want, maybe we can do a quick exercise together and invite everyone with us to join.
That would be amazing. Obviously, if you're driving, I'd ask you to pull over to the side of the road when it's safe. If you're driving and listening to this podcast on the highway, you can even wait till you get home and then do it this evening or the next day.
So the very easy, well, it seems easy, but it is a challenge, exercise is the invitation to focus your attention to your breathing, right? It can be another object, it can be a mantra in your head, but let's here take the breathing. We've been breathing since the beginning of this podcast, but it was like an autopilot, right? Now we really will focus our attention to this. And when you do that for a while, your brain can't help it, it thinks. So you will have these thoughts popping up, and that's the exercise, then to acknowledge that and bring the attention back to the breathing. So I would invite everyone just to sit comfortably, to put both feet on the ground, anchor them. You can lay your hands on your legs, have a straight back. You can close your eyes now, and we will have a couple of conscious breaths. So we will inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Wonderful. There we go. In, out. We can count the breathing. So 1, very good. 2, and we're going to exhale a little bit longer. Let's do 3 more. In. Keep the attention to the breathing. Out. Very good. And the last one. Excellent, Yvette. We can open the eyes, connect back with where we are. That's it. And if you do that, you can notice yourself. If you have a smartwatch, your heart rate goes down, blood pressure goes down. You can measure stress hormones, as many studies have done, they would go down. So this is something I would do in the hospital between two consultations. As mentioned, I see a lot of very dramatic situations where people are comatose after traumatic brain injury, discussing with these families. They've lost a loved one, and it's very emotional. So just to reconnect, and for me, the most challenging is the first breath, just to say, okay, I need this. But you can do it anywhere, while commuting in the tram, while waiting in the grocery store. Do this, take time for yourself. That's one very simple exercise.
Many more in the book too. That was incredible. And I couldn't help think, even in that moment, my brain wants to think, if you can breathe, you can meditate.
And of course, you can go on a retreat and sit still for long periods of time. And that can be helpful. Again, you can decide to run a marathon, but that's not needed. If you do every Sunday your little jogging, probably we don't move enough. So taking care of our physical well-being is important. Well, the same here, taking care of your mental well-being. But it can be many, many ways. As you just said, very often we would be elsewhere in our thoughts. I have 5 kids. They're wonderful. They're little Zen masters. When I go for a walk in the woods, and again, now with COVID and lockdown, we appreciate to be able to go out if we have the opportunity in the park, in the woods. Very often I would be on my phone calling or texting. And even if I'm not on my whatever screen, mentally I'm elsewhere. And they would notice, they would say, Daddy, come back with us. My youngest, Louis, he was walking and he's really there. He sees something. That's where his attention is. You can have a mindful walk. Just for a couple of moments, invite yourself to really appreciate, what am I seeing right now? The colors, the leaves, the different nuances of green, or, well, how do I appreciate the smells, feeling the sun on your face or a little bit of the wind? Or there's many, many ways to do this, including when you brush your teeth or when you cook or when you have podcast interactions, to just be there and monotask. So often we try to do different things, and that's not necessarily the best or only way to be productive.
I loved in your book how you referenced multitasking as a myth, because that research was like, yes, we can do one thing at a time, which is really why I like the mindfulness practice, because it just teaches you to focus on your breath, which is, in a sense, one thing at a time.
Absolutely, yes. And then you can do the same when you're working on a project. As you mentioned, we have these distractions all the time, notifications, email, text those. We were always have this tempted to check, reply, and those distractions make it hard to work on your project. So if you just do one thing, actually you will observe that you do it better, quicker, and there's more resources to be created. Yeah, it's another way of doing things. I think you really discover a new universe there, and the different exercises where, again, depending on why you start doing this, it might be a good idea for each and every one of us. Definitely not only the monks who have such a different lifestyle.
And the reason I really wanted to share your book was I resonated with it deeply, because my journey started with 1 minute. And I worked on that up to 10 minutes, up to 20 minutes, up to 30 minutes. And even after 10 years, I then discovered mindfulness meditation. And I was like, wow. But I was trying all different types of meditation, whether it was loving kindness, say, with all the different apps, all the different things. And it really is journey, a self-discovery of what works, in my case, best for me, might not work best
Absolutely.
for you, and we all have different goals. You included 3 of your favorite meditations in the book. Can you share those 3 with our audience?
So one is the exercise we just did, right? Focusing your attention, doing one thing that can be being attentive to your breathing, You can choose an object, you can have a mantra. Since the book came out, I have a lot of feedback also from Christian and people saying it's not just Buddhist or Hindu. Your Christian tradition, there's also these contemplatives. And actually, when you pray and you repeat over and over, it can also be a form of meditation. So that's about focused attention. And then another one is loving kindness. And just that's the favorite exercise of my good friend Mathieu Ricard. And again, these COVID times maybe are a good invitation to start thinking about, well, what is this society? What are my values? And how can I become a better person, take care of the other as a healthcare professional? It's so important. Again, something is never discussed, and it can be quite challenging. So it's an invitation in this meditation, first of all, to reconnect with your own emotion. We're not robots. Meditation is not there to make you some kind of robot or being without any feelings. You have emotion. The invitation is just described. And also with my children, and my wife is a psychologist who is teaching mindful for kids, we would, for that exercise, give the example of see your own emotional feelings as like the weather forecast. Sometimes it's sunny, but not all the time. Sometimes it's cloudy, it can rain, there can be thunderstorms. So how do you really feel? It's something we often, how do you do? Well, fine, how do you do? But really, how are you? How do I feel is not so easy. And then we can project that to other people. When we see a baby, we feel positive emotions spontaneously. We can train that and then expand it to other people from our family, friends, then broader and broader. Actually, not the only human animal, but all living species, and just become more aware. And again, with global warming and our planet currently endangered, an interesting exercise. So that's training compassion, loving kindness. It's not the easiest one, I must admit. This is something you can grow into. You can also train open awareness, which is just really being attentive to what's coming in through my senses and just appreciate. I'm from Belgium. We have very good chocolate. So in the book, I invite people to take a piece of chocolate. But you really enjoy, how does this look? How is this feeling, smelling? And then little piece in your mouth. A little bit when you appreciate, when you taste wine, really enjoy the moment. And you can do that. We try to do it with the family before every meal, a little moment, actually, what's on my plate. So being just aware of what's out there. And again, I can connect it, Yvette, to the brain. So we're talking about training thoughts, training perceptions, training emotions, right? And in our brain, we have these three networks that I've been studying for the past 25 years. So when we say attention to our inner world, it's basically in blue, these networks. This is a 3D print of my own brain. A bit strange to hold it. I colored the internal awareness network. So that's what you train when we did this meditation, for example, focusing it, trying to bring the thoughts back. If you do open awareness, that's the network you were training. So this is in the front and the back, parts of your gray matter that are important, make sense to everything coming through your senses, what you're seeing right now, what you're hearing. So that's what you would be training. And then there's the third one, deep inside here, part of the limbic system, important for emotions, and when we talk about loving kindness. So those three systems are the ones that you would train with the three exercises I summarize in the book, and the many different ways to actually do it.
For those who are wondering what part of his brain was he pointing to, I'd invite you to go to the SPAITGIRL YouTube channel, because you'll be able to see Dr. Steven Laureys was just holding up there. What I love about your work is you did talk about 20 minutes being the optimal amount for meditation. However, I loved your approach and your mantra, which you've called do what you can.
Absolutely.
And I feel that for busy people, that's so practical. There are a lot of people burning out right now, mentally exhausted. You are always taught to look after other people, to serve other people, to put your patient's needs before yourself. You, in your personal experience, sadly lost some colleagues due to burnout. How do you now prevent burnout, and what are some of your self-care rituals that you do to really just help your overall health and well-being?
As you said, do what you can. Don't put the bar too high. Sometimes we're tough with ourselves, with other expectations are very high, and then you get disappointed. Just enjoy. I think the only thing to do start meditation is being curious, being motivated, and give it a try. Today, for example, I didn't take time to have formal meditation, but I've been throughout the day exercising informally. So that's it. I will really try to make this part of my activities at the university, discussions with the kids, with my wife. I'm not a Zen master. You can ask them. And sometimes when I'm driving home, I had a terrible day and colleagues saying nasty things that are going through my head again. I can't help it. And then kids tell what happened at school. My wife comes home and, ooh, I feel it all. And then I just need a break. Sometimes it works better than times. It's okay where we have emotions and we can acknowledge. The exercise we just did actually is an invitation to observe, right? You had these thoughts, as you mentioned, popping up while you were trying to focus on your breathing. You can do the same with your emotions. You observe them, you can label them. You are not your anger. You have these angry thoughts or feelings, but then the moment you say that, you become a little bit less angry or anxious or whatever. So that's the exercise. And it's a continuous workout, I would say. I'm very, very happy. I would still enjoy a glass of wine. And, it can help us in these tough COVID times, but it's clearly not the answer, right? Sedate your brain with alcohol or pill. I don't know in Australia, but in Belgium, France, a lot of people take too many sleeping pills, tranquilizers, and part of my job is also try to reduce them. So clearly here we have an alternative. It's really the power of the mind. It's meditation, but in the book I also mentioned hypnosis. You can do yoga, you have the body scan, you have the mantras, many, many ways to fill this in. And of course, also take care of the rest of your healthy life. That doesn't make sense to do meditation, but then don't care what you're eating or not doing any workout or not sleeping well and so on and so on. Very often all of these things are interconnected, and then it can spiral down, bring you to burnout or push you to suicide. That's how powerful it is. But the same power can go in the positive direction. That is something that was a true discovery. I'm very happy to share that now with particularly the rest of the world, including Australia and the patients and the colleagues. And despite the hype, I think there still is a lot to do. And I also now work a lot with business partners, banks, and people, CEOs, and so on and so forth. In North America, we see it more and more as being integrated in the workplace. I think it's very positive and it makes us more assertive. Also, when we're not happy in our work, when we do meditation, we become more aware of it. And then, we would maybe change job. I see this as a very positive opportunity of the power of the mind and, as a neuroscientist, the visible neuroplasticity.
And do you still like practicing yoga?
Yes, again, I'm a very irregular person. Sometimes I would be all excited, like I decided to run the Marathon of New York for my oldest son 18th birthday, and then I would be all in running, and you can do running meditation. Then there's moments where I'm into yoga, and my wife is a big yoga fan. I should need a little bit yoga because I've been sitting too much behind my desk. That's how I am. I go one to the other, but also there's the routine. You brush your teeth every day, and you should take care of your mental well-being every day when you can. And the way you do it, that can change and vary, and that's definitely the case for me. So currently, yes, you're right. Maybe I should start doing yoga again.
How many thoughts do we have a day?
We have tens of thousands a day. It's very difficult to measure. So sometimes you can zone out, sometimes you can be in the flow. So there's a lot of things going on there. Nobody really knows how many. It varies. And it's very positive, of course. The aim is not to become thoughtless. I mean, then you would be brain. That's not the aim. It's to give you some control and to stop your thoughts from controlling you. So I think that's the challenge. And it's very good to sometimes daydream, and it can help you for creativity. But you lose that focus, can become hard to do your job.
There was something in your, and it was you're on a retreat and you were going to do meditation and you were sitting in a low position your knees were aching.
There's no way if you sit still after a while, it hurts. Me, it's the knees, it can be the hips, whatever. And then you want to move. And actually, the more you start moving, the more this takes mental space and it drives you crazy and you just want to jump up and leave. And so then the invitation is, well, observe this, appreciate the changes. It's also something as a neuroscientist, looking at thoughts and perceptions and emotions for more than 25 years now with all these brain machines. I've never ever seen a perception, including pain or a thought, that was permanent. These things come and go. When you meditate, it's also an invitation just to appreciate that these things change, and that gives you actually an opportunity to deal with it differently. I have a lot of people with chronic pain, and they would still feel that there is this chronic condition, but it would bother them less. And so again, it's something that gives you the power to change your perception. And for me, that was very interesting to go through that.
I liked how your meditation teacher at the time, pain is good. Sit with the pain. Observe it. You are not your pain. Valuable words of wisdom, because sometimes we can think, this pain is never going to stop. Is this pain ever going to go away? And that's what I like about meditation. And you talk about this more in the book, how it teaches you to notice the pain, be aware of the pain, but sit with it. And I think that's a really valuable tool in itself, especially for these stressful times.
Absolutely. Now, I wouldn't say to a patient with chronic pain, good, you have pain, and it's good there's the pain. I'm also very happy that we have these painkillers, different interventions. I sometimes have the impression that as a medical doctor, we have this black-white vision. There's the drugs, and then there's meditation. One is an alternative for the other, which is for me not true. They're really complementary. I would use all possible means and give people with chronic pain the painkillers if needed, but also give them the tools, including meditation, but also hypnosis. Yvette, you should know we use hypnosis in our hospital for many decades now, having more than 15,000 patients who underwent surgery, and I'm one of them, where you are laying awake and just no longer feel the pain. You feel there's something, but it doesn't disturb you. Another very good example of the power of the mind. All of this is possible, and I'm very happy that I now have this in my toolbox to let the patients pick and appreciate depending on their needs. And it's actually not just what we measured in the brain, even in chromosomes. In the book, there's this drawing of the telomeres, these caps that protect your DNA. And so it's been repeatedly shown now that when you grow older, these caps, they become smaller and you become more vulnerable for diseases, including cancer. And meditation actually gives you a possibility to have a positive impact. So even the level of your genetic material, we can see that meditation has a measurable effect.
But what is neuroplasticity?
It's the fact that your brain is plastic, that it changes itself all the time. When I was in university in the 80s, it was still thought that we only lose brain cells. We now know that's not true. A decade later, it was discovered that you make new nerve cells, especially more nerve connections. And also the people listening to this podcast and remembering anything from it, well, it will change the connections in your brain. So that's brain plasticity. It's what we've been studying in the damaged brain, but that's something that each and every one of us is experiencing. And of course, when we get older, things change. We can compare it again, sports and the Olympics. You don't win the 100 meters Olympic gold when you're 70. The same when we grow older. I discuss it in the book. Your metabolic activity, the energy use would go down. But again, it has been shown in meditation experts, and you and I, if we would do it regularly, then you have an impact on the brain's metabolic activity, including the aging process. And we now have in Europe a couple of projects where we propose it to people who are at risk for Alzheimer's. So clearly this is not a vaccine. It's not going to cure the disease, but definitely it gives people a possibility to have an impact even on those terrible diseases.
But how important as a scientist was it to get someone who is we would call Olympian meditator?
I'm very, very grateful. Mathieu Ricard is exceptional because he's a scientist. He has a PhD from Institut Pasteur in Paris, molecular biology, and then He kind of had an existential crisis, went to India, Nepal, and went through the Buddhist training, and now translator of the Dalai Lama, has more than 60,000 hours of meditation and still counting. And so for him to discuss the protocol, to not just have him as a guinea pig, but he's also a co-author on the paper. So that interaction was wonderful. It was very brave from his side, and then it permitted other Buddhist monks to come. And it was also for us important as scientists to keep an open mind. Very, very happy with that dialogue. And now we actually have studies, clinical trials ongoing, where we propose meditation in patients who had cancer, and showing that it can improve their quality of life, that it has added value when they're confronted with chemotherapy and all the anxiety that comes with it. So clearly we went from the experts to each and every one of us in a clinical context. But then, of course, as you say, we shouldn't wait till we get, I think it's very important that we take care of our mental well-being, and also in a preventive setting.
Why did you choose to also include other people's stories?
I wanted a book that I basically like to read. I saw a lot of meditation books where the bar was quite high. They were asking a lot from me to do. And as said, I'm not a Zen master. I'm not a Buddhist monk, very far from that. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And I wanted to share that and have a very easy read with anecdotes, but also with the science, with the clinical trials. And I hope those testimonies would inspire others. So it's important that we have CEOs and lawyers, but also athletes, young people telling their story. And it was wonderful to do this with Bloomsbury publisher. Had the opportunity to discuss with also artists like David Lynch. And David's wonderful. He's meditating every day. He says it's helping him with the creativity, making him definitely a different person, but he's still smoking. So again, it's the philosophy. You do what you can and accept all the things that are more challenging for you to change. But that was wonderful to have the different angles and to make it an easy read, not just limiting this to one specific school, because that would be like saying you should all start running. Well, maybe you prefer going for a swim, having another sport. So to me, this is the same. There's many different ways to do this, and that's with the very easy exercises that I enjoyed and I wanted to share with others. So I'm glad you liked it. You gave the opportunity for this podcast.
I have to say, your book is very, very easy to read. And from someone who has dyslexia, I can say that with certainty. I've always been confused about consciousness and thought, and even sometimes meditation. This really is the no-nonsense meditation book. I love how it's more practical for an everyday lifestyle where people are busy. It talks really to all of us in a way where it's, hey, I'm busy. I've got XYZ going on and I understand you have too. So just do what you can, even if it's a minute. So it's an invitation to just start. And that's what I loved. And I do love how you teamed up with Matthew Ricard, because he is fascinating. There's this beautiful quote, just go to that in the back of the book. He just talks about without wisdom, you misperceive everything, and without compassion, your wisdom is not much. But I like how you bring him into the book. So between you and him together, you remind us that we all have the ability to work on our own health, mind and brain, become more present, just be more meditative in our day-to-day relationships. You talk about that when you're with your son and you're on a rope and you're swinging and you want to take this photo of him and he's like, hey dad, put the phone away, enjoy the moment.
And he's absolutely right, of course.
Now, what is your hope for your book readers?
People, by reading this book written by a neurologist, neuroscientist, the feedback I have, some engineers, skeptics, saying, oh, well, if he says so, maybe I should give it a try. Well, then I succeed. I hope you will like it. And I also hope that you will really do it, because meditation is meditating. It's not just reading the book, it's giving it a try. And as you said, it doesn't need to be 2 times 20 minutes. Every moment counts. And there's so many possibilities there is give it a try, be curious, and then enjoy the journey.
Yes, well, thank you, Dr. Steven Laureys. I could talk to you forever about your book. You've met some incredible people like the Dalai Lama. There's a beautiful photo of you two there. And I just feel really grateful that you bring the global community together where we have the ancient wisdom, we have the science behind the brain, one of our most complex organs and most important organ. I just really love how you're meshing the consciousness and the two and how curious you are. And I feel that your book now is really going to help all of our podcast listeners for many generations to come. But when we're in a global pandemic, but even before the pandemic, we had a mental health epidemic or crisis, and mental health is one of our key areas where sadly we're losing people every day when the brain isn't functioning or when people get burnt out from stress. So this book is a gift to us all, and thank you to you and Matthew Rickard and all of the people at Bloom's. It's a big team effort, and the stories and the people you interviewed. I love how you included your wife and also the many people you've met along your retreats and your kids. But it's been a really big group community effort. So thank you for all of your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
How can we stay in touch with you after this podcast show?
So there's all the social media. Check it out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and send us an email. Very happy to stay in touch and have the feedback from our Australian friends.
Thank you
so much. Yes. Bye.
Bye. We'll say goodbye to Dr. Steven Laureys. Be sure to subscribe, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love to. And together, let's feel good.